started. I think we'll go ahead and get started, everybody. So welcome to Mapping the Credible Data Universe. I'm Ginger Bandeen and Nicole Morris is here, and we're excited to get started. We always like to first know where you are in the world, so let us know in the comments. This is a picture I took the other night up by my house. If you look really closely, well, the first mountain in the foreground is Mount St. Helens, but if you look behind it, Mount Rainier is actually showing up a little bit in the background, which is on certain really clear nights, we can see the very top of Mount Rainier from behind Mount St. Helens from here in Portland. So that is a fun picture from that night when you could see everything. So just a few quick housekeeping things. As I mentioned, we're recording today's session so you can relax and absorb information. Please ask questions as we go. Nicole and I were talking about today's topic is a lot. We're trying to cover quite a bit, but we still feel fine if you ask us questions. Just be patient if we don't answer everything right away. We're going to also review the notes after the meeting and see what we want to do for our next session. So if a question's like in your mind, feel free to like pop it into the chat. And because I know sometimes it's hard to like hold on to those and then ask them later. So go ahead and ask. If we can't get to them right away, we'll either get to them at the end or we'll definitely plan to do like a future event. Okay. And materials. Yeah, so we'll share these slides after the webinar. We'll also probably do some kind of handout. So no panicking about, furiously taking notes. So nice to see you all. Oh, folks from Minnesota, some more folks from Oregon, California, Washington, Virginia. So good to see you guys. Thanks all for being here. Oop, that's what happens when I have my cursor in the wrong place. Okay. So you are in the right place today. If you understand Credible as a user, but you're new to thinking about the tables behind the scenes, you're also in the right place if you don't use Credible very much, but you've been asked to figure out how to get the data out of it. You're also in the right place if you already do some things with Credible tables, but you'd like to see if there are things you're missing. And you're in the right place if you're just curious about how things work behind the scenes. And I would add to that, like, curious about how people talk about things like tables in databases, or you just kind of want to like do some exposure therapy to like how it works when people are talking about this kind of stuff. So you're in the right place. All of those things are fine. And if you have a lot of experience already using the Credible tables, we're also glad that you're here, and we think, maybe we have something to offer that'll be useful. But also sometimes it's just good to like remember some of the things. So I think it's good, to come to something like this. So our topics for today, as we mentioned, we're going to talk about like the 15 tables we use all the time in Credible. The ones we've decided to start with, because we're kind of seeing this as like the beginning of maybe like a series of webinars. So for today, we wanted to start with kind of basic information. So we're going to talk about different places client information is stored, how to use the data dictionary tables, how to look at visit information, and then we're calling it like a billing taster, like a tiny bit about billing, just to kind of dip your toes in the water about that. And you'll see here we have a pirate map. You'll see that today's theme is all about pirates, and Nicole and I were talking about that fits because we're here in Portland, Oregon, and somewhere in Portland there's like Talk Like a Pirate Day or like Pirate Day. So we thought that it would help take the edge off of looking at data. Like, it's just for fun. We're just looking at data. So speaking of which, the reason I like to do sessions like this that are kind of more about like, how do we just like gently introduce ourselves into tables and fields and data is because I'm a social worker. So I started off in clinical practice. I've worked in lots of different clinical settings and then started doing quality improvement, and then eventually started doing data projects related to clinical data and operations data at mental health centers. So I started Mission Driven Data 6 years ago. We work with like 65 agencies all over the country and always growing. And it's my favorite thing to get to work with agencies to think about how all this work you're doing to put data into a system can be more valuable to you as you get it back out. Nicole, do you want to say a little bit about who you are?
Sure. So I am located next door to Ginger here at Mission Driven Data headquarters. I just want to say that I also was in direct service and was a therapist, and only in a behavioral health webinar led by two people who were case manager and caseworker therapist folks would we mention exposure therapy. for looking at data. I love it. Yes, I really, really like data and being able to sort of demystify that. All along in my entire life, I have always been really hungry for more information and knowledge. And I love the fact that I get to share that with you all.
Thanks, Nicole. We're very happy to have Nicole here as our Director of Professional Services. So, mission driven data, in case you don't know much about us, we basically have three parts to our business. We have a data tool that's specifically designed for Credible, for the Credible EHR. It's called Janet. We are currently branching out into some new EHRs, which is very exciting. But we also host an online community. This event is part of that. So if this is your first time joining us, please join our online community. There's lots of previous webinars. If you kind of like this kind of idea of like learning this way, you'll enjoy, I think, a lot of them. We also have a lot of guest speakers in there that just talk about like different ways they're using data or just new ways of thinking about data and outcomes and all that good stuff. So join our community. That's all free for anyone who wants to join. And then we also do consulting. So we help agencies understand their data and get more use out of it through our professional services team, which is what Nicole supervises. So we always like to start off with a quick poll. So I'm going to go ahead and start that poll. We would love to know who's here. It's always so good to know, like, what's your background a little bit so that we can kind of tailor how we're talking about things and think about that as we're talking with you all. So if you're somewhere where you can reach a screen that has a keyboard or a mouse, could you please let us know? What is your experience writing queries against a credible database? Like, let's see. Have you only looked at tables in advanced search? Have you written queries in the ad hoc query builder? Have you used written queries using the export tool? Have you written some freehand SQL? Have you written queries using two or more tables? Have you written queries using one table? Have you written queries using subqueries? Or have you written queries in Janet, which is where Janet helps you get your data out of Credible so you're not writing the query within Credible anymore. You're like writing it in like SQL Management Studio or Azure Data Studio. So cool. Thanks everybody for filling out the survey. It's so fun to know who's here. And then the second question we had is, what training have you had in SQL? Just because we're going to be talking about tables and fields, which are all part of a database, and the Credible database is a SQL database. So a lot of the information we're going to be talking about has to do with SQL, but don't panic if you haven't taken a lot of classes in SQL. A lot of the people on our team are self-taught, so don't feel worried about that at all. We just like to know what else you guys have done as far as training. So looks like for the group that's here, it's very mixed. There's lots of people here who've only looked at tables in advanced search or just written queries in the ad hoc query builder. There's a few people who have done some things with subqueries and other things with multiple tables. And then as far as training, some people have taken a training from Credible or from Qualifax. Some people have done independent training. Some have done mentorship. Some have taken some free trainings from us, and other people have done some online training, which people are being very kind and putting in the chat. I know I'm going to go ahead and end the poll. Thanks everybody for answering. I wanted to say, if you are someone who took a SQL class and you loved it, please let the people in the chat know, because we get that question all the time. And I know there are a lot of like free resources out there for SQL, but if you took a SQL class and you really, really liked it, yes, we are taping today. Sorry, I should reiterate that we are recording. So yeah, if there's a SQL class you took that you loved, please let people know in the chat. Maybe say like why you loved it, but that would be cool. All right, moving on. So let's talk about tables. Incredible. So we wanted to start off by talking about what we're kind of calling like core client tables, which includes the three we're going to talk about first are the clients table, the clients extended table, and the client episode table. The first thing you're going to notice, besides this adorable map that we're using for the background, a lot of our slides, but the first thing you'll probably notice, and that trips everybody up at some point, is the fact that the client table in Credible is called clients with an S. And the clients extended table is clients with an S, and it's always so easy to forget the S. So if you raise your hand if you've ever forgotten the S, I totally have. So, but the clients table is often the first place you go to start off with every client that's ever been entered into Credible is in that table. So if you want to start a report off of everybody who's ever been entered into Credible, you want to start from that table because every other table might only have a limited amount of information, but every client who ever gets created lives in the clients table. And then we're going to talk about how these connect, and we're going to talk about what they look like in Credible. So I'm going to go to the next slide. We're going to talk more about it, so don't panic. So the clients table is related to what you probably are used to seeing in Credible. Nicole, do you want to describe this? Because you're better at explaining how it looks in Credible.
Yeah, so if you think about the profile, and sometimes you might get to this by going to the overview and then you might edit or view more, that profile, typically that holds a ton of demographics information. It's what sometimes we think about as like the primary sheet or face sheet for what is happening for that client. If you look at the overview, and then the profile is sort of the data that is specific to that client in like their first name, their last name, demographics, some other pieces. Should we go to client extended? Should we talk about that? Because it's sort of in the same sort of place.
Yeah, you could talk. Yeah, I'll come back to this slide and we'll talk about the bottom half, but we'll talk about the top half of the client extended slide.
So in clients extended, it oftentimes has just the additional information. And just so people don't get sort of confused, when you look at that profile, you'll see all the main profile. That's what's in the clients table. And then at the very bottom part, you'll oftentimes see the clients extended as well. So in Credible, you can look at just the profile, you can look at the clients extended, or you can look at the client profile, scroll down and see also the clients extended. Both parts are in both the clients table and the client EXT or clients extended table.
Cool. Okay. Thanks, Nicole. So I'm just going to go back and start back at the client profile. So Nicole and I were talking about thinking about what are the things that we look for, the data points that are in the clients with an S table that we use all the time. I would say client ID because that is the fancy term for it is like a primary key. It's going to be the key that connects a lot of other tables. So client ID we use a lot. Date of birth is useful. Client status is useful. It's important to know how your agency uses client status because you may, many/some agencies don't ever change the status of a client. So you might not be able to assume that just because that client status on the client's table says active, it doesn't necessarily mean that that client is actually active. Usually there are special workflows agencies follow and may or may not ever change that status on the client profile to something other than active. But if you do that, that's where it gets tracked is on the client's table under client status. There's also first name and last name in the client's table. There are things in the client's table like admission date and discharge date, but again, we want to really emphasize that depending on your agency's workflow, you may not be really using those fields or they may not mean what you think they mean. So we always kind of remind people like, if you're not just, but if you are the report writer, but you don't use Credible on the user side that much, it's really important to know like, how are people using those two fields before you like assume that means really like the first day someone was admitted or the last day they were discharged. Is there anything else you would say about status or admission or discharge date, Nicole? On the client
No,
profile?
other than that, I do want to mention that everything in both this table and the clients extended is a current, what is entered currently. So
Yes.
if I changed the status, it won't tell me what the status was last month. It'll say what the status is that I entered in somewhere on the profile for this client in real time or when it was last changed.
Yes. Good point. Thank you, Nicole. Sorry, I had like a brief moment where I was like, am I sharing my screen? Someone would have told me. Okay. Sorry,
You're
thanks
good.
everybody. Okay.
You're good.
So the next field that I wanted to just mention is the deleted field because when you're writing like SQL just straight against the clients table, depending on where you're writing that, you might also be getting deleted clients. And I have run into agencies where like they did a big migration and then they had an oopsie. So they like wanted those clients deleted. And so those clients still exist in the client's table, but they have a flag in the deleted field that means they've been deleted. So sometimes it's just good to check that and see if you have something that you want to exclude because they're deleted. So I like to call that one out. And then the other thing I just want to mention here, similar to admission and discharge date, is if you are looking at the table in like SQL or like behind the scenes, it has a bunch of stuff in there that might sound really cool, like severity level. You might be like, oh, wow, this is where I could find severity level. But those names you see in the table are just like the standard fields that come with Credible. It doesn't necessarily mean that your agency is using that field in the way it sounds. So it doesn't always work to think like whatever it sounds like is what it is in here. And we're going to talk about how you can figure out what your agency is doing with that field. But I just wanted to call that out that like there's cool things in there where you might be like, awesome, I just want to know severity level for maybe that's where we have level of care. And it might be, but it also might not be. So it's just good to use that with a grain of salt. Anything else here you would say about the client's table, Nicole?
Yes. Along those same lines, sometimes why you have things like severity level or admission date is because Credible goes ahead and says, we automatically give you those fields in this table. And it may be that your agency uses those, or they may have created some other custom field. And we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to sort of the data dictionary part of today. But I wanted to mention it's really common to have several fields that are similarly named, especially when you get to things like the race field that is in the client's table. There will be one that Credible has automatically configured for every domain of Credible, but also you might have several others that you have configured or created over time at your agency. So being able to find which fields people really use and for what and what it means is really important when you're thinking about doing your development work.
Cool. Thanks, Nicole. So just moving on to clients extended, we similar idea here that if you see fields there, don't assume they mean what they sound like they mean. And then I was just going to make this note. I've run into it once in a while where there is a record in the clients table, but there is no record in clients extended for that client. So this is where if you're writing SQL, it's really important to remember to use an outer join from clients to clients extended, because otherwise it'll take anybody out from both tables if they don't exist in both places. So I can't explain why that happens. Do you know why that happens, Nicole?
I think that the only way that that could happen is that there's been something interesting happened with a import. Maybe
Okay.
during the time where you were first starting to do your like implementation of a domain, that might be a case. Typically, most often, you would find if there's something in the clients table, if a client ID, that unique identifier is in the clients table, it'll also be in the clients extended.
Yeah. I just know I've run into it where you have to keep that in mind. So yeah. Okay, and then the data dictionary tables, we've already mentioned this, are going to help you translate that information into how your agency is using those fields. And don't worry, we're going to cover that today. We're just going to talk real quick about one more kind of general client table, which is the client episode table. So the client episode table, how does that typically look for agencies? Incredible, Nicole.
Yeah. So I think probably most agencies get to client episodes by looking on the left nav bar of a client chart. So you go to a client account in the client tab, and then on the left nav bar, you have probably a button that says client episodes or maybe episodes. I think I saw one agency one time that called it enrollment. All of those, if that is the episode part, where you can kind of say what program, when did they enter, when did they leave. A lot of times that means that people have a one-to-one relationship. When you assign a program, it automatically creates an episode, but that's where you'd find that information.
Cool. Thanks, Nicole. So here's a few fields we use in the client episode table all the time. The episode ID helps us count episodes, but it also helps you connect episodes to like services that are within an episode. Program ID, we're going to talk about the programs table later too, but like that helps you know what programs associated with that episode. And then I included 4 date fields because this is very commonly when we do want to know how long has someone been open or how long was someone open in a program slash episode, assuming you're an agency that uses those two things kind of interchangeably. we use all four of these dates. And I've written out a little bit of SQL here that you can borrow, which is that if you're trying to find out how long an episode lasts, we recommend looking first to see if there's an admission date, but if there's no admission date, fill in the date created there. And same with discharge date. Look first to see if there's a discharge date, but if there isn't, look to see if there's a date closed auto, which is where you can auto close episodes a certain way incredible, and then they're closed even though they don't technically have a discharge date. If you as an agency have another date somewhere where you track something, you could do the same thing with that date here. But I just like to point out that like pretty commonly, if I'm going to figure out like how long an episode lasts, I'm going to use these two pieces of data to track that. And ISNL, by the way, is just a fancy SQL way of saying like, look first here. And if there's nothing there, meaning like if it's null, then look for it in another place. So yeah. And then some agencies don't tie episodes to programs, or they use something different to track open services. So that's just a little caveat there. So is there anything else you would say about episodes that you use all the time, Nicole?
Oh gosh, I love the client episode table. It can be a really great way to be able to see the history of when clients come in and out of certain types of care. So we talked a lot about the clients table and be how that was current, like what is currently true. The client episode table can be a way to see historic information. So being able to see what was true for a client 6 months ago or 3 years ago, because it shows where they oftentimes, depending on how you use your episodes, where they came into care and might have left care or changed the type of program that they were receiving care in.
Yeah. And there are a lot of fields you can customize on the client episode table. And so often when agencies are thinking about how to set up Credible, they'll think about custom fields living at the client level that are more like static, and things living at the client episode level if it's something that might change every time someone comes in. So like who referred the client, that would be different every episode. So you might have a field like referred by on your episode table. It's called client episode, by the way, just to be clear. I keep calling it the episode table. It's technically called client episode without a space. Um, and for fun with no S, because that's the only time you use the S with clients is clients and clients extended. So yeah, client episode. So yeah, so things like the referred from, what are some other things I've seen on that? Like maybe like any kind of like things you need to track as of the day someone came into services. So like how many arrests they'd had in the last year, or maybe like things like that. So a lot of times, a lot of state reporting fields come from there too.
Yep. Or things when somebody is leaving care for a program. So I think about like a discharge reason.
Oh
We
yes.
talked about sort of having that date auto closed. Oftentimes that gets put on when you go ahead and unassign a program. It automatically closes any current episodes that are associated with that. And that discharge date is usually what time, like what people manually put in to say, this is when I am saying that this client is ending this episode. And so being able to also at the same time that you say, I'm saying that they're discharging from this, and here's the reason why, whether it was AMA or successful completion of treatment, et cetera.
And a cool tip is if you have like a discharge form that people fill out, you can map like the discharge reason from the form back to the episode, because theoretically they're only ever going to discharge someone once from an episode, right? And so that way you can kind of make it so that they don't need to go to a separate place to document that, but you still have it connected to like the start date, the end date, the length of time, like it's all right there in that same little table. So that discharge reason can be really helpful there. Cool. All right, so we talked about these three main client tables: clients, clients extended, and client episode. Now we're going to talk about these customized fields. So you can build all these customized fields, and the place that the map to those fields is stored is actually called data dictionary or data dict if you're looking at it in the table side. So the data dict is technically really like the actual map of, you know, a field from one of the tables that you're allowed to kind of customize in Credible to what you've mapped it to be. You know, you've either mapped it to have a different name, you've hidden it because you don't want it, or you could have maybe connected it to a drop down menu, which the fancy word for basically a drop down menu in Credible is lookup dictionary or a lookup, or in this example, we're showing that it can connect to a table called lookup dict, which is where custom like drop down menus are stored. You can also use some other tables as like the drop down for the field in those tables. Like marital status is a table of its own, and you can just use that table. But we're going to talk about how this all works. So we're going to go to the next slide. Or was there, yeah. So again, as I showed in that first slide, there's a main table, and then that connects to it. You can use the data dictionary to figure out how that connects to your lookup dictionary. So the way these fields look, if you just look straight at the fields that are these special customizable fields in a table, is it'll look kind of like this picture on the left-hand side. It'll just be like kind of stressful to see because you'll be like, what the heck are these things? And so the data dictionary screen, Incredible, is where people actually set up what each of these things mean. And once you kind of understand how that all works together, it's actually kind of elegant. It's kind of cool. So the data dictionary will tell you what the field name was customized to be. It'll tell you whether it connects to a lookup dictionary table, and then it'll give you some more information about it. But we're going to show you that here. So this isn't what the data dictionary screen looks like. Incredible. Nicole, it's possible that like at an agency, not everyone would have access to this screen, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. So through your sort of security matrix and depending on your profile, you may or may not be able to get to see the data dictionary and see how things have been customized.
But the cool thing is it's just a table. Incredible. So if you're not allowed to change, if they want to not give you access because they're afraid you're going to accidentally change something, you could still figure out what's stored in that information by using the data dictionary table. So often when we're supporting agencies, we may or may not like have a login to Credible. So we might just be looking in the tables themselves to figure out how things are connected. I like this example here because it shows you that name on the left-hand side is like that kind of generic name that we saw in that picture before, and then it shows you what it's labeled as in the, so if a user logs into Credible, the name in the view label is what they actually see, not the weird name on the left. And then it shows you what order things are in, and it shows you, and then there's a checkbox that would show if it's a lookup table, if it goes to a lookup, if it goes to a lookup, yeah.
Yeah. I think that something that might be helpful for folks in that slide is if you're familiar with seeing things on the Credible side, is that know that the data dict table will have every possible field, even ones that have not yet been configured. When you look at it in the data dictionary in Credible, you can see which ones have been utilized and are set up that people are going to see or use. So you may have something in the client table called text 18, and that has been renamed as alias / nickname. And then if you went ahead and it was a lookup, you could go to that edit and see what lookup it is referencing or using. And then in the tables, you might also see, if you looked at the clients table, which is the table source here that we're looking at, you would see text 18, and it would just be called a field called text 18, but you'll also see text 19, text 20, and so on, even if they're not yet configured to be customized and used.
Yeah. It's like the menu of everything. It's not everything you're using. Yeah. Thanks, Nicole. And here's an example of what it would look like if you clicked on edit. So this is an example of, like I mentioned, your lookup can go to the lookup table or like a custom drop down, or you could map it to an existing table that existed. And it happens to be that marital status is a table that already exists in Credible. So often when people are putting in how they want marital status to work, they'll just map it to marital status, the table. Other things usually aren't their own table in Credible because there's just so much variation. But for whatever reason, marital status is somewhat generic, although I'm sure there's variations. And sometimes people who find it, you know, one of the reasons to make a custom dropdown is like if you need a different list of things to show up depending on where you are in Credible. So sometimes using one thing like marital status will work one place, but then somewhere else you need it to be a different list of things. So then you would use those custom lookups. So don't panic. We're going to talk about how to actually do something with these, okay? So let's say that you were trying to figure out, let's say you don't have access to your data dictionary. But you're tasked with trying to figure out something about the data. And so let's say you were looking for like a veteran field in the client's table. Like, people do something with veterans, you don't know where they track it, you just want to find it in the data dictionary table. This is the little query you might write to figure that out. So you could also just do select star, but these are kind of the key things you're going to want to know about a table, about a field in order to understand it. So we're just selecting these fields from the data dictionary table, and we're telling that data dictionary table the table we're interested in as clients, and we want ones where the label is something like vet. So that's going to give us some false positives too sometimes, right? Like if you have like, I don't know, veteran status and you also have like veterinary status, or I don't know, something else. You could have something else show up at the same time. Um, oh, that's such a good question, Erica.
It really is. I was in the middle of typing it out.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes, the answer is
Wait, oh,
yes.
time out, time out. We should repeat the question because of the video. So,
Fair.
Erica,
So the question is, can text to the field have different info in the client episode table versus the client's table? And the answer is yes. You will likely have something called text to as a field that's in the client's table. You'll also have a text to in the client episode table. They will not be the same data. Those are just custom fields that they've called text to in clients and text to in client episode. Where those are labeled and what those have meaning for is actually in that data dict. So you might have text to in the client's table as gender identity, and then in the client's episode, that's your discharge reason, where people just get to enter in the reason that they discharged.
yeah, the wording text to is just like a placeholder that means there's a text field here you're allowed to customize, and they have those in multiple tables, which is very confusing. So thanks for asking that question, Erica. Um, Yeah, and so this example where I'm is kind of going the opposite direction where I'm trying to figure out where there is a field. I know there's somewhere on the client profile where people are putting in veteran status because someone told me that, and I'm trying to figure out where it is. So the way I would do that is I would look at the data dictionary table, which is called data dict, and then I would give it, say, I'm looking at this table and I want to look for one where it says something like vet. Anyway, okay, so we're talking about the data dictionary table. If you ran this query and you ran it in like when I ran it in a SQL Management Studio, you get a result like this. It shows you the data dictionary ID, the column name, the table, which is it's and that it's this is a lookup, so it's looking at the lookup table it's using is a lookup dictionary, the ID that it uses, the description where you would get the description for it, and the where clause. And so basically, with this set of information, you can create a query that looks like this. Um, I brought forward the same information again so you can see where I'm getting it from. So if I want to find the veteran status for my clients, I would say client ID to find each of the client IDs. And then to get the veteran status for each client ID, I'm going to, in the thing I'm going to select is whatever is in the DD description column. So in this example, lookup description. I'm going to select it from lookup dictionary because it told me that was the table. I'm going to say where the lookup ID, which is the DDID column, equals the column name, DD11. And then I'm going to attach this little where clause also. So what this is telling me is this field goes to a custom dropdown, and I want to look in that custom dropdown list for just the things in that dropdown that are labeled with the category veteran status. So I'm copying that over into my query. So we basically wanted to give you this in this slide because you could translate this same idea if you use that first query. Once you have the results, you could do the same thing and replace the same ideas with the same things here and get any field from any table from the data dictionary. So I realize that is like a lot of SQL for people who maybe don't have a lot of experience with SQL, but the point here is that you could copy and paste this. You could retype this exactly as it is. And what this is going to give you is a query that tells you every client ID and their veteran status. And you could do this little nested select, this little part that starts at the comma to the end of veteran status. You could do that for any data dictionary field that has a lookup and it'll work using that same logic if you just kind of match. If you're like me when you're still doing guess and check coding, You just find the matching things. So if you do a similar thing, you'd find the matching things and put it in the right spots. So that is a very quick,
Why?
go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry, Ginger. I was just gonna say, I think that this is why the theme of pirate and treasure maps is so perfect, because it is like you are following little clues and connecting to the next part of the map so that you can get from the sailboat to the X, from your starting point to your end point.
Yes. Yeah. So I know that's a lot, but I just want to point out that like this is very like transferable. Like you could use this same idea by using these same example fields to make your own query. And I encourage you to try it out. Just go into the ad hoc query builder and do that same. So what you would do is you would start with, oops. So you would start with this query where you look for the thing you want to find, right? And you could copy my text exactly if you want. And then once you have the answer, it's going to look hopefully very similar to what I've given you here. And then you're going to use that to create this query that's going to help you find the thing in the table. So that's why we gave you all this, and you'll get the slides and you'll get the handouts and it's going to be okay. But that the idea is we want you to, oh, that's a good question. Can we make it so you could copy and paste? We'll do something as a handout that lets you copy and paste better. Yeah, we'll do that. No problem. Thanks for that feedback. We'll include something that has text that's easier to copy and paste because I know sometimes in a PDF it's hard. Cool. Okay, so that's how to get things from these custom fields that are in some of the tables in Credible. So we've talked about these basic client tables and we've talked about how to get custom stuff out of those tables. Now we're going to move on, and the next topic is client visits, or I would call them like events, different ways that events are stored in Credible. So we're going to first kind of do an overview of the different places, and then we're going to talk about how they overlap, okay? So first we're going to talk about client visits. Nicole, how does this usually look in Credible?
Okay. So you know when you open up you might go to the service tab, you might have it relabeled as visit tab, incredible, and you go and you look up one visit and you open it up to view it. There are actually two parts of that. There's the upper part, and that is the client visit table information. The bottom part, which is should look like your form that people filled out, that actually is in a different place. So today we're just going to focus on the upper part of that, which is the client visit data, which has information about when the visit happened, who did the visit. It has a bunch of billing sort of needed information for billing to go out. The actual things that people answered inside the form, we might go ahead and have that be in a different webinar in the future, depending on what demand there is for that. But today I really want to mention that don't go looking for what the answer that people selected in a form in the client visit table. You're really going to be looking at just that upper part of the client visit.
Yeah. So I would think of it as like the sort of the like bones of the visit, like what happened, who was it for, who did the service, what time, all that kind of stuff. So we gave you a little cheat sheet here of like fields that we use all the time from client visit and how you might use them. I hate when people read slides on webinars. So I'll just call out a couple things. We always use rev time in for the date of a service. Um, oh yes, we're happy to do a future webinar about save visit answer and stuff. But we're at the end, please stick around because we're going to have a poll about what you'd like to see next, and that's on the list. So stick around. Okay, as we're talking about client visit, so we're talking about rev time in is a really useful thing to find dates of service. Visit type is in the client visit table, which is really handy. There's also a visit type ID, but there is technically a visit type, which is nice. That's the type of service. Non-billable is the other one I would just call out. Like it's really useful to know how to eliminate non-billable services or just look at billable services. Some of these other ones are a little fancy pants, like split primary and split secondary are if you have the reason I included them is if you are in a state where you're doing CCBHC stuff and you have all those T1040s because every time you do a service, you also generate a T1040. One way you can eliminate those is looking for these two things to be filled out. And if there is something in the split primary visit ID, that means you are currently looking at the secondary service as opposed to if there is something in the split secondary, you are looking at the primary service. So again, you're going to get this handout. We want you guys to feel comfortable to ask us questions when you get this, but I rather than read it all, those are the ones I just wanted to call out. And then there's a little bit more on another page because there's a lot in this table. Um, just in case you're like looking at your client visit your table and you're like, what the heck? There's also like client first name and client last name in there. Those are like a snapshot of what the client's name was on the date of the service. So I've made the mistake before where I was trying to like count clients and I was counting their names. And I realized that someone whose name had changed was going to duplicate because if I was looking at the client visit table, it might show some visits with their old name and some visits with their new name. So usually the best practice if you're trying to just look for like the current name of the person, you would link back to the client table and grab the name from there. But it is in this table as like a helper in case at some point you basically because of like record retention, right? So the old services would still have the old name. Combined duration can be useful too because that helps if you have like a lot of split or combined services. It's good to know that that is there. Is late is only going to work if you've configured things right in your system. So it doesn't always work. Approved tells you if services are approved or not. And sometimes people also look at auth IDs. Okay, so that's all the client visit table, which I would say is the table that many, many queries are built around, right? We are often writing queries around client visits. But there are a couple other places where events live in Credible that we just wanted to touch on. And it's like a very fun Venn diagram. So in this Venn diagram, you've got your client visit table. And then encircling your client visit table is something called the client visit temp table. And then you've got your planner table, which intersects with both of them. Wow, I used some geometry there, like intersections. Remember that from like, okay. Um, so well, there's more slides about this, so don't panic. We're gonna like talk about it. But basically, things that are scheduled show up in Planner, meaning there could be things in Planner that are only scheduled still because they haven't happened yet. So nothing has happened to turn them into a visit at all. They're still just in Planner. So if you're ever trying to look at like future appointments or appointments that no one ever finished resolving, they are in the Planner table, but they don't exist yet in these other two tables. Um, these other two tables, um, we're going to talk some more about. I'm going to go to the next slide because it'll explain a little bit more. So things that have happened live in client visit temp, including incomplete services, and completed services live in client visit. So we're going to talk more about that here. So I wanted you guys to have the little links. So like the client visit links to has a plan ID in it that'll take you back to the planner table. The client visit temp has a client visit ID, and so does client visit, and client visit temp has a plan ID just for fun. Um, so I'm going to say this once, and then Nicole's going to say it in a much better way. So if an event is in planner but not in the other two, it's still just scheduled. If an event is in client visit, it should always have a record in client visit temp because at some point it was an incomplete service. But if there's something that's in client visit temp, which is the incomplete services, but it doesn't have something in the field called client visit ID, it's still incomplete. How would you say that, Nicole? You'll say it better than me.
I think the idea is that if you schedule a service, it's in the planner table. However, you can do it and enter in an event right through ad service, and then it wasn't scheduled. So that's why you see things that like basic sort of mutually exclusive potential, right? Like something could be in planner and it didn't create client visit temp. The minute somebody selects begin service, it creates something then in the client visit temp table. Some of those might have been scheduled before, some of them might have been entered through ad visit. But every time that you sign a service, it goes into the client visit table. So every client visit started off in the client visit temp table, but not every client visit that got started, like your incomplete, are still in your client visit temp, but they didn't make it yet to the client visit table because nobody has signed them.
And they might not have ever been in planner either. They might have just been in client visit temp.
Especially if you just did it through ad service. Yep.
Yep. Cool. So this can be really helpful if you're trying to look for like services that are stuck somewhere, or you're trying to find your no-show rate, or you're trying to figure out like why aren't we making payroll this month? Like this can be a really useful way to narrow that down. Here's just how those look. So incredible. You can find that everything in client visit temp that is not yet in client visit will show up when you go to incomplete services. And the planner table will look like these scheduled services. So, all right, we're gonna talk about what connects up with the client visit table. And these some of these things also connect up with these other things. But one of the things that's really cool about the client visit table is that it has like breadcrumbs to other tables because a client visit is of course related to a client, right? And it's also related to an episode and a program and a type of visit and an employee I mean there's a lot more than we even covered here. But in the client visit table, and this part is a little bit more like what you see is what you get. Like it is what it sounds like. Like if you're looking at the client visit table, you see something client underscore ID, that is the client ID from the clients table. And if you see something called program underscore ID, that's the ID from the programs table. By the way, programs is another one that has an S at the end, just for fun. Episode ID, this one can be a little confusing. It is the ID from the client episode table, and visit type ID goes to the visit type table. So there are even more in there, like auth ID goes to the authorization table, employee ID or emp ID goes to the employee table. But the whole principle here is these are, if you want to get fancy, like SQL languagey wise, these are like foreign keys that go back to a primary key in another table. But all you really have to remember is it's like a breadcrumb. It's like, oh, I see something and it kind of sounds like something else. And we're trying to show you some of the trickster ones, right? Like episode ID is to client episode, which is annoying, but that's like the one annoying one. I guess program ID goes to programs with an S too. That's kind of annoying. But anyway, the whole idea is that that's what that's doing. So this is kind of goes back to like how a relational database works. So, and I'm going to show you kind of what I mean. So, you know how incredible you set up your list of programs? The idea is you only have to do that once. And then everywhere where you're referencing a program, you're referencing it based back to that table instead of recreating that table every time. So the programs table is set up once. Then you can assign programs to lots of different things. Services and episodes are connected to programs, or can be. Programs can also be assigned to clients. But basically, you set programs up once. You don't have multiple lists of programs living in Credible at the same time. There's just the one list. And then everything connects to that using program ID. What else would you say about programs, Nicole? And I know we're getting kind of close to out of time.
No, I think that's good to know. I would just say in general, if you look at a table and you're like, I see a field there, but it's only giving me numeric information and I would like something that's human readable, you probably need to go look at the table that has that breadcrumb to go get the human readable part, because I'll never memorize that 64 is intensive outpatient. I want to see that it says in human readable language intensive outpatient.
Good point. Yes. So usually what you're going to do is link the two tables on an ID, and then you're going to put the description in your report, like in whatever you're pulling the data from. So same, I know we're kind of running short, so I'm going to go through a couple more of these. These are all the same idea, right? Teams, same idea. It's set up once, things can be assigned. Both program and team have this fun caveat where there are tables called like team client, client team, employee client, employee. I always forget which way it goes. If that's like a big thing on your list, put that when we get to where we're asking what you want to do next, let us know. But that has to do with the fact that a client can have many programs. So they can't just have the program ID live in the client table. So instead, there's like a table that holds the connection between the client table and the possible programs they're in. That is another, I think that's a better new webinar. I just wanted to point out that those are special sauce. Location is simpler because locations are incredible. Services have one location. We did want to point out that there is something called place of service for billing that is sometimes not the exact same thing as the description of the location. So sometimes people want to know that. So it's just good to know that. And locations can be connected to geo areas, but they don't have to be. but there is something called location ID in client visit. And if you just link to location, the location table, you can pull in the description. Recipient type, same idea. There's something called recipient type ID in the client visit table, and you've made a list of those, and then you just connect to that. And this is often where agencies will store like in person, by phone, or by telehealth. Visit type is the same idea. It's your service types. Sometimes there's additional information in there that's useful about visit types. Like it'll tell you what the current form is that's attached to a visit. It'll tell you what else? I think there's some other things that are kind of helpful. Sometimes there's like an external code you might want to use. Um, yeah. So and sometimes some places incredible you see the description and some places incredible you see the label. So figuring out which one people would prefer to see can be helpful. Um and then yeah, they're in the client visit table just to be like kind of a little slightly inconsistent. They do actually bring in the name of the client visit. So it has, sorry, the name of the visit type. So it has a visit type and it has visit type ID. So technically you can get away without linking to the visit type table from client visit. But other tables are not as nice to you. Like the planner table doesn't have the visit type. So you have to link to the visit type. And I think client visit temp might not either. So it's just good to know how to go get it.
Yep.
All right, we are very close to out of time. The last little bit we were going to cover was like a little baby taster of billing stuff because we know that billing stuff would be like several webinars. But we did want to touch on one table that can be very useful for billing, which is client visit billing. That one is nice. It's got lots of summarized information in it. It's probably technically like it's a calculated table that Credible generates for you. And it has some useful things in it that you can do without too much extra work, right? Like I think this is true. Every client visit has a record in client visit billing. I didn't double check that, but I think that's true, Nicole.
I think it has to maybe be batched. So you could have have something that you have not put out to be billed yet, and it wouldn't be there.
Cool. So it would be good to use a left join if you still want all your client visits. But if you left join out to client visit billing, you can get all of this information. This is more like a little snapshot of where the billing is sitting right now for that visit. So it can be useful for like figuring out where things are stuck. You can link it when payer ID out to your payer table. I don't think we can cover much more than that without everyone like feeling really overwhelmed. And we don't want to end on an overwhelmed note. So what I would love to do is just get you guys to let us know what we should do next. I'm going to go ahead and launch our next poll. So we really want to know which one, well, first of all, of the things we talked about today, which one are you most excited to try out? So we talked about clients extended and client episodes. We talked about data dictionary. We talked about client visits. We talked about programs, teams, location, recipient, and we talked about client visit billing payer. And then now that you've got a general understanding of these top 15 tables, which by the way, Nicole and I both knew that trying to cover even 15 tables in like 50 minutes was going to be a lot. So you guys have been good sports. But then we'd love to know what should we do next? Now that we've covered these, what do you want to learn about next? We kind of see this as maybe like a series we're going to do throughout the year. So just because it might not be your next thing, don't panic. It might be we do it down the road. So the options are something on billing and finance, something on form answers and questions, something on treatment plans, bed board, medication and orders, notifications, employee visits, or something else. Let us know in the chat. So yeah, I'm going to give everybody a chance to answer this one because we really, really, really actually want to know, like, what do you guys want us to do next? Because, you know, we kind of have our own ideas about what we think will be useful, but we always want to know what you guys would find useful. So yeah, and I guess I didn't say this at the beginning of the webinar and I meant to, like we are not officially affiliated with Credible in any way or with Qualifax. So all of this information is just based on, you know, our experience and our knowledge and the things we use every day. There are, of course, trainings you can take directly from Qualifax. What we like to offer y'all is hopefully like maybe the perspective of people who use a little bit more like layman's terms for things and have a little bit maybe more real world experience with doing things. So I just wanted to caveat that if something we said today conflicted with something Qualifax told you, feel free to reach out to us. But we also totally understand that we're not going to be exactly like how they would do a training. So if you haven't voted yet and you have strong feelings, get your vote in now because a lot of people are voting. And right now, what's winning is forms, answers, and questions. So, and then after, so if you want something other than that, get your vote in. It looks like also quite a lot of interest in client treatment plans and billing and finance. Medication and orders is kind of running behind those, and then employee visits, notifications, and bed boards. So, if you don't have a chance to vote right now, like if you're somewhere where you can't vote, you're always welcome to shoot us an email too and be like, Ginger, please make sure to do this. So, all right. Thanks everybody for voting. We appreciate it. Super helpful to have you guys all here and giving us feedback. And it sounds like people are excited about that data dictionary thing. And I think the other thing I'm going to take away from that is that it helped that we did a little more of a deeper dive on that too. So I think one of the things we're going to try to do going forward is hone in on some like specific things and get you a lot of really good detail about that too. So cool. Okay, I'm going to end the poll. All right.
While you're doing that, Ginger, I also want to say if we aren't able to get to the topic that you want for a next webinar in the time in which you need it, please reach out to us. One of the areas of service that we provide is consulting to be able to help you out with those things. And so feel free to reach out. We're here for you.
Yeah. And also you could come to co-working. So I'm going to talk about co-working here in a second. So first of all, we just want to mention that we just ran a really successful user group for all credible users, not just people who work with us, for Oregon and Washington. And we did that in June. And it was, I consider it to have been a huge hit. We had like over 50 people come. It was a full day of people sharing ideas, connecting, talking about different features they were using and what was going well and what wasn't. And if you are in a state or a region where you would like us to come and do that, it's kind of a cool thing we were trying to offer everybody. We'll cover the cost of food, we'll rent a space, we'll help organize it, we'll help do the agenda, we'll help you guys get together with each other. So if you're in a state that would have an interest in that, basically we just need someone in your state who would be like our buddy and help us like coordinate that with who uses Credible. So in your state. So let us know if you should be next because we would love to come and do that. But we do have one more co-working session coming up in July. It's the 24th of July at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. Co-working is very different than this. It's like very informal, but anyone who shows up can talk to one of us, me or Nicole or one of our other solution consultants about what you're stuck on. And we do our best to answer your questions. Sometimes we write SQL right there. Sometimes we send you a query afterwards. So you get a lot of hands-on support and it's really fun and informal and nice. So join us. And then we have an upcoming webinar. This is coming up like out in October, but we're going to do a deep dive on some financial data that we work with an agency who's done a lot of really cool reporting related to financial stuff. And we're actually going to try to tailor that to like finance people. So like your finance people could come and like think about how the data from Credible could be more integrated with like your accounting systems. And I'm really excited because I'm not an accountant and the person who's going to be helping us with that is. So I'm very excited about that. And then there's always an opportunity if you do something cool with data that you would like to share with the group, or this is the other one. If you hear a really cool guest speaker at some event that you're at and you want to push that information our way, please let us know. We are always looking for new guest speakers and new topics. We really like sharing good ideas. So please help us out. Just a reminder to join our free online community. All of the trainings, like there's more trainings like this one. So if this kind of style works for you, come check it out. There's cool trainings in there about SQL, Power BI, Credible, using data, all kinds of cool stuff. All of the recordings end up there. So today's recording will eventually be there too. And just a reminder that we have a really cool product called Janet that helps you solve a lot of these problems, especially if you're a CCBHC. We've done a lot of work this year on upgrading our CCBHC modules in Janet, and they're really cool, and we really love working with y'all on that. And people love working with us on CCBHC stuff so much that they're like sending our staff flowers. So I feel really special to have such a great team. And if you are a CCBHC or starting to think about that, keep us in mind. Our mission is to help you all have better data so that you can support your mission. That's the whole idea of our company. We want you guys to have what you need. We want you to be curious. We want you to have, continue to grow your skills. So events like this are really very aligned with what we care about. So we're really glad that you're here. And here's how to contact us. This is my email and phone number, and that's Nicole. And Whew, we're a minute over, but it was great to see you all today. Thanks for coming. And we will be in touch soon with what we end up doing for our next session. So keep an eye out for that. The other good thing about joining our community is you're automatically kind of on our list of people who will get emails because the community gets email notifications. So yeah, thanks everybody for being here. And feel free to watch the recording on lower, like slower speed. I know sometimes we were talking really fast to get through everything. So yeah,
We just get excited.
we get so excited. So, all right, thanks everybody. Take good care and have a good rest of the week, and we'll see you soon. Okay.